The Doomed Planet podcast is sometimes about Seattle true crime. And so we have some axe murders. And we'll be cribbing from a book called Queen Axe Hill and the Green River Killer. And that book is by my friend Mills Rackley, and I actually am the publisher of the book. You can find it only on Amazon as an ebook. It's in the Kindle Unlimited category, which means if you're a Prime member, you can read it for free. But please don't go to Amazon or give them one fucking penny. Amazon is complete evil. That's why we're going to talk about the book on this podcast, but we're not going to do the Gary Ridgway / Green River Killer chapter. If there's a bigger piece of shit walking on this planet right now, other than Donald Trump, it would be Gary Ridgway. And I think I made a vow early on in this podcast that we're never going to talk about him, and we're also not going to talk about that Seattle musician that was murdered. So here we go. Doomed Planet, episode 19, 4 Seattle Axe Murders.
I'm a person. They're gonna kill us all. I wish I was shorter, because they like people that are tall.
I have lived atop Seattle's Queen Anne Hill since 1979. Through no fault of my own, my neighbors and I engage in few crimes and have a range of emotional volatility that results in few murders. This I will not defend, but I can offer you the following as a bit of spirited compensation. Queen Anne is the Pacific Northwest's font of all things axe murder. That's right, axe murder. Advisory, gore and horror. Gone bananas. In March of 1990, a hilltop breakfaster had a different kind of morning. Someone had been picking at the fruit bowl and leaving an axe behind. The axe is the part that excludes the wife and kids, and John Law comes riding in. The handle of the thing is dusted for prints, and a donut or two later the offending article is entrusted to the homeowner, who exiles it to the back porch, from whence it would disappear into the ether. 1 week later, in a prim colonial over on Bigelow Avenue, our cutting tool turns up in the body of 63-year-old Geneva McDonald. Neatly partitioned, she had also been filigreed with her very own sewing scissors. Investigators recognized the axe. It still had fingerprint dust on it, and, given the extreme violence of the scene, came to the stark realization that Mrs. McDonald was probably killed by a burglar. Fair enough. Sometimes burglaries take an odd turn. No need to impugn our overworked cops, and Queen Anne slept soundly as before. Move ahead a bit. A proper Queen Anner sleeping soundly, dreaming about replacing the patriarchy with a truly inclusive value structure. Suddenly he's awakened by an intruder at the foot of his bed, chef's knife held high. He reaches for his gun, is sharply reminded that he doesn't believe in guns. In the ensuing chicken fight, his hands are slashed to filigrees before the attacker calls it a night. Our homeowner calls 911, provides a quick recap, and asks for an ambulance. The operator informs him that it would be simplest if he made his way to the 7-Eleven down the street, where a meat wagon was idling. This is the part where we impugn our overworked cops. Next day, a pair of bobbies fresh off the Winchell's drive-thru pay a courtesy call. Facts are made Ernst note of and carbon copied, and the nodding tut-tuts that only hardened beat vets can issue are issued. A week later, the guy down at Fort Apache who works the Univac looks over the punch cards and sends a cable. This slasher matter was just a couple doors down from where old MacDonald bought the farm. The gag here would be E-I-E-I, dough. But this isn't funny. CSI drops by and the hill erupts. No one responds well to serial killers. but yuppie housewives are particularly ill-designed for that. So there was not much grace or compassion for others during the block parties of that season or the building of fortifications. Windows were nailed shut, doors bolstered with chains and Charlie bars. Motion-sensitive dogs of every shape and nature were procured and assigned. Beanie Babies were set aside and replaced, ironically, by insanity. Anecdote. I had taken in a fine beagle pup that summer and wished to secure it from its idiot wanderings with a backyard fence. That requires stabbing stakes into the ground at post points. Running out of stakes, I thrust hedge clippers into the ground as a marker. The police were called. Our new night visitor's reign of terror was at once prolific and a bit of a tease. Entering through unsecured doors or windows, he would creep to the kitchen and have his ravening way with unsecured fruit and the occasional bowl of cereal. After a digestive stretch on the sofa, sated, he'd lay out his calling card, an axe or a hatchet, then further memorialize his visit with a graffito that read, with a refreshing scorn for subtlety, "The killer is back." In this way, he haunted over 100 homes that summer, some just like mine. Actually, mine. Around about this time, I discovered that someone had gotten into my garage, stolen some old fireworks, and dropped off an ice axe. The officer assigned to the crime chortled that I had gotten the better part of the exchange. I still have that ice axe. It's one of my most treasured possessions, see front cover. And the book Queen Axe Hill by Mills Rackley, you see the actual axe in the cover art. Reigns of terror sputter out, and the Queen Anne axe murderer was chased down the street in early September by a peeved homeowner who snapped away with his Instamatic all the while. Shown the snapshots, we recognized neighborhood loon James Cushing, bane of the Mecca Tavern, where he communicated with the mothership using nothing more than a wire hanger, and Tower Video. He spent hours staring at slasher splatter video boxes. The Mecca Tavern is still, Tower Video is gone, the Mecca Tavern lives on, and it is owned these days by future subject of a Doom Planet true crime episode, David Meinert, who was accused of some horrible sexual assaults. He's also was a friend of mine up until that time, and I'm still friends, unquote, with him from one of my many fake Facebook accounts. Cushing was a lifelong, straight-up street tard with the intellectual capacity, tastes, and sensibilities of a 7-year-old, apparently. At his arraignment, when the judge asked him if he knew where he was and why, Cushing thanked the bailiff for the sandwich. You can be insane all you want, but if you're insane enough to chop up an old lady, then you're sane enough to do some pretty mad time. And Cushing was sentenced to life without parole. From the Seattle Times, September 20th, 1990. Suspect in killing had tragic history by Carol M. Ostrom. You might know that surname. The Ostrom family have a corner on the mushroom market in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, Canada. Anyway, usually charges filed against a suspect in an axe murder would be cause for a certain degree of self-congratulation down at the cop shop, especially when good police work played an important part of the case. But there was no joy in homicide, say those close to the investigation, when charges were filed against James William Cushing, accusing him of aggravated first-degree murder in the axe slaying of Queen Anne resident Geneva MacDonald. Some of the people who knew Cushing, a 36-year-old transient who has spent much of his life in state institutions and in group homes for the mentally disabled, remember him as Jimmy Cushing, a likable 20-year-old resident of a Bellingham group home who took great satisfaction in learning basic skills, but who grew profoundly disturbed when staff changes disrupted his sense of belonging. He began his journey through the mental health system at age 14. Was in and out of group homes and was not in touch with reality. So I know Mills Rackley, he's not a politically correct person. You notice he called Cushing a street tard. But, Mills, he's a good person. He's 93 years old, so you got to give him some credit for not being the wokest of woke. And he's a funny writer, even when he's writing about axe murders. We'll be right back.
And now, advertising from our sponsor.
There's a lot of good things in life. Me, I like driving through the redwoods. Making that first run on fresh new powder. Pizza with the works. And the taste of Olympia beer. On the job, I like working with guys who know what they're doing. And catching a great old movie on the Late Show. I like filling it inside straight. Walking the beach with TJ. Talking, kidding around. I like finding a great little bar overlooking the bay. And the taste of Olympia beer.
It's the great light taste of Olympia. The one great taste in creamy beer. The great light taste of Olympia. That's what I like.
Seattle Times, January 25th, 1991. Jurors here see bloody details in Queen Anne axe murder case. Jurors today were to resume hearing the grim details of the axe murder of Queen Anne resident Geneva MacDonald. Some photos shown yesterday of the axe and scissor wounds MacDonald suffered as she lay sleeping last March in her home brought reactions of disbelief from the 6 men and women hearing the trial of James William Cushing. MacDonald had been killed by multiple chopping blows to her face, upper torso, and hands. The axe, stolen from a home a few blocks away, was left beside MacDonald's bed. Okay, moving right along to another gruesome murder. Going you know where. Pity the man with the stammer, the rabbit lip, the cleft or faltering tongue. He cannot have smooth lady skills. Lifelong stumble mouth, James Fiore, had no other qualifications to make up for it. Pasty, balding, postal worker, untattooed and not in a band, Fiore had been cursed with an average man's sex drive. Driven by it to ballet lessons, a bowling league, even the grinding indignity of singles clubs. Nothing coming of it, except perhaps the grim, growing sense of himself as unbecoming. But there's always whoring. Elaine Alice Scott was born drawn to the bad decision, and in time would amass 28 years of those. Dropout, titty bar, 4 children extruded into adoption mills. 3 years in the stir, no home, no car, a duffel bag full of old letters and makeup. A family who loved her and suffered. Smart and pretty, addicted to heroin and the adrenaline rush of failure. On the evening of July 17th, 1993, her appetites and those of James Fiore merged on Aurora Avenue North. They transacted at his South Slope View apartment on Queen Anne with $70 mixed into the repast, and there was a rest period. James Fiore, no arrest history, talked to himself. Never opened the curtains in his South Slope View apartment. He was variously described as diligent, meek, gentle, functional, and, creepiest of all, avuncular. But never this way, as a man of broad life experience. At 47 years of age, Fiore didn't know what the rest of us learn as youngsters, or just know intuitively, the first rule of prostitutes: don't leave one alone near your pay envelope. So when he, après-dide, stepped out of the shower to find a young bad decider rooting around in his pay envelope, he reacted like someone with no experience with that. It cannot be emphasized enough. Postal worker. Work an assembly line in Detroit, and you can point to a Ford Fiesta and know you had a hand in it. Garbage men beautify. Social workers socialize. Postal workers, not mailmen who deliver holiday missives and notices of birth, shunt pieces of paper, most of which are garbage to be pulped and repurposed and brought around again to the shunting table. Of course, you would become a disgruntled person, easily ruffled. Now, back to our story. He stabbed her to death, then strangled her. Then he shot her to death with his pistol through a pillow. And into the tub she goes as he gathers his thoughts. The consequence of the moment becoming clear as his pulse becomes measured. And so eventually he would look down at what he had done and realize she will need to be made more manageable. A neat partitioning? Our protagonist had once been a Navy corpsman, schooled in the dark arts of gore. He finds a cutting tool, an axe, as our story would have it, and has at it. But what Fiore possessed in gorecraft, he lacked in the requisite insanity. And after the right arm and head came off, his nerve gave out, and he packed all the tragic parts of Mrs. Scott into the Ford Fiesta, and we head out into the night. Naked, headless woman's body found in street. That's a headline every copy editor dreams of writing. A quiet lane up north in hinterland Seattle had gotten out of bed and discovered and had flavored coffee around most of a female torso right there where the kids get picked up. It was pure murder mystery, a whodunit that would endure for almost 12 hours until some pretty snappy cop work came into play. Patrolman Lance Ramsey had been caretaking North Seattle the evening of the 18th when he spotted some dodgy driving and made the pullover. The motorist was nervous, fidgety, would not look at the officer. Blood on the hands and the hatchback were explained in terms of fish cleaning, and in those sweet days pre-9/11 the cop had no legal basis for further inspection, but no reason not to scribble the plate number on the pad. When word of the body came along, Ramsey passed the info up the line, and detectives dropped by Fiore's flat over at 518 Prospect. It's 2 blocks from the 7-Eleven there. New to murder, Fiore invited them in. The blood on the carpet, tools, and ladies' garb was explained as stage blood, then chicken blood, then leftover blood from a blood drive. Fiore crumbling like a spelunker's nightmare. He sang his sad song. Then came a citywide scramble to track down the discarded implements and parts. The head and arm had gone into a Green Lake dumpster, from there to a massive landfill in Oregon. They were never recovered. Fiore got 27 years. According to the Orlando Sentinel, the crime shocked normally quiet Seattle.
Tortillas, oh yeah. It's supposed to be tortillas, oh tortillas. This is supposed to be a...
Okay, gruesome murder number 3. The story of Mike Webb. Very interesting guy. He's a radio personality who started off as a teenager interviewing people and doing broadcasts from anti-Vietnam War protests and civil rights protests in the 60s. He was born and raised in San Francisco, and he covered the story of Harvey Milk getting assassinated. Gay rights activist Harvey Milk, city supervisor, and the San Francisco mayor, George Moscone, were assassinated by ex-city supervisor Dan White. And Mike Webb was there covering those events, and also the riots, the White Night riots, those that happened after the jury found White guilty of voluntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. So Webb moved to Seattle and had a long career up until he was accused of insurance fraud and fired by Cairo. And then his life spiraled out of control, and as you are guessing, he was murdered. So this is Mills Rackley's version of the Mike Webb murder. Suicide by Crackhead. Mike Webb's life had turned into shit. He'd long had an asshole's dream job, a talk radio spot on major player Cairo. Not quite intelligent enough to be a shock jock, bridling with blazing speed at slights real or imagined. He'd been working the unhinged angle during graveyard hours to the merriment and credulity of voyeurs and insomniacs for 10 prime-of-life years. You can tell that Mills Rackley was a listener of Mike's show and disliked Mike. You'd think that would be a lucrative gig, but decoration and upkeep on a North Slope Queen Anne teardown takes some sweet green. Fortunately, the self-appointed populist who had for so many years fought corruption and dishonesty over the airways had done so as a sharp student. To wit, he and his Lexus are smacked at an intersection. Webb has Geico on speed dial, makes the call, gets a policy, files a claim the next day with a couple of fudged facts. So Geico gets a new customer, Webb gets a $6,000 check, everybody wins. During the trial, he took his role as the unhinged radio host into the clean Seattle streets where it didn't belong, running into traffic during lunch break and threatening jurors with the burden of his suicide if they didn't accept that the whole misunderstanding was the result of a computer error. Lunch was ruined, a mistrial declared. During the second trial, he, this account of Mike Webb's attempt to defraud Geico has proven to be the most gruesome part of this entire booklet, and I will not describe it further. Mike Webb, angry idiot con. His lawyer asked for a reduced sentence of 18 months, but the judge laid down the heavy lesson, 240 hours of community service. So he not only loses his job shouting on the radio and sours his relationship with the American Insurance Council, but he would be spending a summer's worth of weekends down at the soup kitchen slinging tuna casserole to non-celebrities. Life turned into shit. Fortunately, he had a hobby. It was November of 2006, and crackhead homeless boy Scott White, looking for new opportunities, was taking his constitutional through a Lower Queen Anne crack park, when suddenly the clouds parted and there was Webb. An encounter kissed by fortune. You see, the older radio screamer had done his time with substance and recovery, and, thus ennobled, had dedicated his free hours to mentoring young addicts back onto the healthy path, asking nothing in exchange except sodomy. Everybody wins, and Webb moved the promising youngster into his home. In this season of Mike Webb's misery, the crack-addled lad was a godsend, bringer of comfort and consolation, hope, and the insouciance with which only the young are blessed. And Webb, too, had things to offer a young man in need. Small appliances, computers, game console, collection of old coins. On April 14th of 2007, Scott Brian White brought Webb to a state of happy exhaustion, feigned a cigarette run, gathered up an axe. For Webb, another type of climax. His body was bundled up in plastic, crammed into a crawl space, covered with packing boxes. Over the next 2 months, White posed as Webb via text, using the man's cell to send messages to his friends and family, each an adventure in bad grammar describing peripatetic travels and quiet time. Seattle PD did their thing, running a cadaver dog through Webb's home not just once, but after a neighbor pointed out black flies crowding the inner surface of the windows a second time with no result. Explanation: Webb's beagle had been diarrheal, and busy people don't have time to clean, and everything in the air becomes confused, even for a specialty dog. Imagine that as you smell fit. I'm sorry. Imagine that smell as you see fit. And visualize as best you can White's cherubic band of crackhead chums, impervious to odor, slipping into the death house at night to squat, loot, do toilette, spoliating and ruining and practicing the strange rituals of their clan. 2 months of fine times until the landlord chases them off and a cleanup crew makes the find. Eventually, one of White's circle of junkie ragamuffins turns snitch, strange as that may seem, and the police scooped him up at Queen Anne's Trolley Hill Park. Legal haggling took forever. On June 3, 2009, White pled guilty. Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Ramsdell gave him 220 months, with another 24 months added on for using an axe. According to our favorite Seattle hippie historian, and not Paul Dorpat, I'm talking about Newt Berger, Webb was a troubled person. Webb treated me with courtesy, and I respected what he did, but there was another side to him. Webb's behavior alienated some of his Cairo colleagues. His firing from the station, his conviction of insurance fraud, his courtroom behavior, and his courthouse breakdown all suggested a very troubled man. And much of that trouble was documented on Michael Hood's Blatherwatch blog, which became a forum where Webb's friends and enemies hashed out their views of the man. I saw a sign of Webb's troubled side a few years ago when I was editor of Seattle Weekly. He called me to complain about a freelance writer who was looking into a dispute Webb had with the Seattle Police Department. Webb was nearly hysterical, felt the reporter was harassing him, which wasn't the case. Webb seemed to have flipped out. And thanks to archive.org, we see the MikeWebbMedia.com website, and was put up less than a year before he died. Currently hosting for Progressive Network's nightly talk show. Talk show host at Seattle's #1 Cairo, beating the Mariners with 13 shares. And welcome to the Mike Webb Media website. Mike Webb Media provides fully digital multi-track recording facilities on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. Our focus is on creating the best-sounding voiceovers, demo recordings, and broadcast imaging at the most competitive rates in the Northwest.
Yo, I'm a tortilla.
I'm a tortilla, baby. I got cheese.
I got beans.
I got the little bit of meat and
Sour cream.
And finally, more of a lighthearted murder, our last murder for this episode. Axe Away. This one predates the internet and perhaps record-keeping of any kind, so I look for help to my long-ago conversations with the late, great Russ Zabel of the Queen Anne News, and to my own skills at embellishment. A man, his dad, and his brother are quaffing at Targey's Tavern, 600 and West Crockett on the Hill. His general drift, getting boring, is going to kill that bitch. Seriously, fucking kill bitch. The others mock him. Gauntlet thrown. Our man rises from his stool, staggers home, kills the girlfriend with an axe, rolls her up in an area rug, and then calls King TV with the scoop. Says to meet him at Targey's. Resuscitated on the stool, he boasts and receives a new round of jibes. King asks the police to mediate the matter. They arrive, investigate, hook him up. As he's led away, he declares, "Wait, we can't leave. King TV is on its way." True story.
Ich skulle jakt in jävla. Hold down.
And that is Mills Rackley's Queen Axe Hill and the Green River Killer. And we're not reading the Green River Killer part because that killer, Gary Ridgway, is probably the worst, foulest, vilest piece of shit to ever walk on this planet, other than Mike Pence. Speaking of horrible, horrible politicians, podcast shout out. Again, the Jimmy Dore Show. He really goes after the hypocrisy on the left. He's not happy, none of us are, that Bernie dropped out and then endorsed Joe fucking Biden. And he's unhappy that Nancy Pelosi passed the multi-trillion dollar bailout for the wealthy that includes some provisions for working people, but it's mostly just a giveaway of trillions of dollars to the wealthy and powerful. Jimmy doesn't really go after a piece of shit Andrew Cuomo, but here, I'll just read some recent headlines from The Intercept. Again, this is the governor of New York. It's having a nightly infomercial disguised as a press briefing where he can elevate his profile, much in the cynical way that Giuliani did after 9/11. Andrew Cuomo keeps hiring Republicans. Governor Andrew Cuomo's budget proposal would force grassroots activists to register as lobbyists. America's crisis daddy, Andrew Cuomo, exploits coronavirus panic to push bail reform rollback in New York. Amid coronavirus crisis, Andrew Cuomo held New York's healthcare hostage to undo criminal justice reforms. And Rikers Island is in his jurisdiction. That's all you got to say. Shout outs to listeners of the Doomed Planet podcast. You can email us doomedplanetpod@gmail.com. Kay and Geronimo, especially, just have such good memories of them. They live up north somewhere on the Canadian border. I went into their shop and they're having lunch. And lunch was a breadboard, a package of saltine crackers, a jalapeno, and some good cheese and a knife. And they were sitting there making little cracker sandwiches. And it was just such a sweet thought. And what a great lunch for some great, modest people. I can't imagine Kay and Geronimo owning 10 houses like Jeff Bezos. And speaking of that, here's our Bezos Town segment. Jeff Bezos is a piece of shit. He's also made billions of dollars since the corona crisis. He's hiring so many workers. The truth is there is a more than 100% turnover rate in these Amazon warehouses. Nobody lasts a year. So that's Bezos Town for you. If we could do Rusty the Media Watchdog, which would also be /podcast shout out. Let's talk about Michael Moore. He has a podcast called Rumble. Let's see. Today is April 19th, 2020. Yesterday, his podcast, he announced it's sponsored by Audible. And he has such good things to say about Audible. What a great company it is. And the truth is, Audible is owned by Amazon. And everything about Amazon is incredibly troubling, as where to begin. I guess with the warehouse workers working for low wages and exposing themselves to a deadly virus. And you could go on and on and on about that. Amazon purchased Audible in 2008 for $300 million. And again, we got to call out people on the left, too. I love Michael Moore, but it's just troubling to me that he starts out every podcast now with Audible, how great Audible is. This is Michael Moore, and you're listening to Rumble. And I'm a hypocrite. Rusty,
The Media Watchdog.
In other news, I have a dongle. That means that we can take our iPad and hit the streets of Seattle, driving in the safety of our car, of course, and kind of do a broadcast. What is Seattle like during the pandemic? One thing's for sure, there's a lot of people walking around. Half of them don't have masks. It's not as bad as the lunatic idiocy you're seeing in Wisconsin and Austin, Texas. These people crowded together protesting for the right to be crowded together. That is, I think when I realized millions of people voted for Donald Trump, that was a revelation. That's just not shocking anymore. There are so many idiotic retards in this country, and they vote. It's very sad, very troubling. Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Am I really going to eat shit on election day and fucking vote for Joe fucking Biden? Dear fucking Armageddon. This has been the Doomed Planet Podcast, episode 19 for Seattle Axe Murders. Our sponsor is Fred's Civil Unrest Supercenter in Cedro Woolley, Washington. Fred underwent a little rebranding. Fred's Guillotine Supply is now Fred's Civil Unrest Supercenter. They have knives, they have machetes, they have prepper supplies of all kinds, and, of course, guillotine supplies. Goodbye.
5, 6, 7, 8. Goodbye. This is the end of the song.